Good evening and welcome to Everything Vaguely Paranormal. I'm Ryan Roberts. These are my partners in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith and McShelly Pruitt. And what the fuck are y'all laughing at already?
Nothing. Y'all should just see me in the green room whenever the show gets started because I'm like there like dancing and making like robotic moves and all this stuff and bobbing my head. And all I can think of what's going through our producer's mind whenever, we're waiting for the show to start.
Getting that last sip of soda and going, damn, this hair looks like hell tonight, but it's all right.
Burping before we go live on the mic.
Yeah. I actually did that too, which is really gross. I apologize. Y'all couldn't hear it.
Nobody heard you.
It's my episode warm up, just robotics back there to the theme song for EVP, anyways, whatever.
Standing up doing calisthenics before you get started.
Yep, pretty much. Whipping my hair back and forth.
Well, how are y'all doing tonight?
I can't even finish that sentence. I'm good. I am great. Jolly, awesome.
Holly, how about you, Jelly?
Jolly? Okay,
that's what he said. He said, I guess.
Sure, I'll be jolly too.
Unfortunately, 'tis the season, I guess. I don't know.
No, not
I'm
yet.
like, listen, you got the good old trio tonight. No special guests, just the three of us. We've been in rare form since Saturday, and it hasn't
stopped. If you have not gone back and watched the Patreon pre and post broadcast from Halloween, oh my God, what are you waiting for?
If it went off the rails real quick.
Yeah, it did.
Off the rails, through the ditch, and into the ravine, and just exploded.
Oh no!
See, this is what we're talking about.
They got Shelly.
That's going to be happening to me all night. I think I've had to reset my router twice. Good thing I'm not leading. So speaking of leading,
speaking of leading, take it away.
See now it's you that's flipping out, not me. Oh God, please don't.
Don't jinx yourself.
But yeah, so tonight we're actually going to be talking about one of the most despicable human beings of all time, Adolf Eichmann, and his eventual capture. But just before we get started, I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of a background on what was going on in Germany at the time and how he got into his position and where he ended up. But also, I'm going to let you know there are a lot of names in here that I will probably butcher because they are the names of Israeli agents, and I'm going to pronounce them the best that I possibly can. So just stick with me, and it's a really good story. And we're going to go ahead and jump in.
From North Carolina, so this should be real fun tonight.
So we'll see how that goes. But
Hans Grubenweiner,
Hans Grubenweiner.
I was just trying to pronounce a German name.
So you were going to kick open the door to some World War II stuff.
Yeah, some World War II stuff. And it's been a while since we've done a historical true crime. And this is one of the biggest historical true crimes of all time. So let's go ahead and get started with it.
All right.
So on November 11th, 1918, the guns of World War I fell silent. Germany, a once powerful nation, is defeated and in shambles. In her defeat, Germany must sign the Treaty of Versailles and take full responsibility for the war to end all wars. Not only must she take responsibility, but she also must pay reparations to all the nations that she harmed. A hefty sum totaling about $442 billion. And that was in money back then. I don't know what that comes out to, but that's a lot. So this caused rampant inflation. And the inflation was so staggering that no one could afford any basic needs. For instance, a loaf of bread skyrocketed to the price of about 200 million marks by the end of 1923. The German people had no one to thank but the Kaiser and his warmongering for the situation that they found themselves in. However, a new representative republic government had been put into the Kaiser's place, and while things were tough for Germany for a while, the economy eventually leveled out and Germany enjoyed a period of prosperity post-war. While things on the surface seemed well for the new republic, all was not right for the fledgling young government. Under the surface, a rot began to fester and eat at the country from the inside out. As it is with many nations going through immense hardships, certain people and bad actors began looking for scapegoats for their misfortune. Many wild and unfounded conspiracies began to swirl around about and pick up about certain groups of people, like certain ethnicities, religions, and creeds. And they were blaming them for all of the bad things that had happened to Germany. These conspiracies, coupled with a deep nationalistic fervor, were a powder keg waiting to explode, and the flashpoint for that powder keg was a little group you may have heard of, looking to seize upon the unrest and guide Germany down a dark path. I'm, of course, talking about the Nazis. A group of far-right goose-stepping morons who were somehow able to convince a whole country of mostly sane, free-thinking individuals to join their ranks, promote German nationalism, and blame the Jewish community for their misfortune. And
Up
with
until,
that,
hold on, we made it
what?
to episode 106 without
Mhm.
blatant opinions on
I
Brian
mean,
just
I think-
shattered that. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, blatant opinions on Nazis.
I
think.
know. I'm fucking with you, dude.
I
I'm
know
fucking
I
you
with you.
think goose stepping moron is a perfect description.
Absolutely.
Me too. Go for it, Ryan.
With that, they tried to seize the government of a whole. With that, they seized the government of a whole country and tried to conquer Europe and wipe out an entire race of people. However, they needed someone to figure out the logistics and get the ball rolling on such a massive undertaking, and they found that in Adolf Eichmann. Now, Eichmann was born in 1906 to a Protestant family in Solingen, Germany. After a few years after he was born, the family relocated to Austria, and Eichmann enrolled in school and went to, he went all the way into high school. But he was never the best student, and much to the chagrin of his father was really pissed off about it. So he removed the young Eichmann from high school and got him a job at the mining company where he was employed. Eichmann hated the hard back-breaking labor of the mining company, so he left in 1927 and pursued a career as a traveling salesman. And he worked for Vacuum Oil Company, and during this time, Eichmann fell in with various far right-wing groups, ultimately joining the Austrian wing of the Nazi Party on April the 1st, 1932. Eichmann rose through the ranks rather quickly in the party. After only 7 months, he would join the most feared branch of the party. Eichmann would join the cult-like Schutzstaffel, or SS, the heavily armed elite paramilitary group responsible for enforcing the party's policies. Eichmann was flying high and was very satisfied in his new standing, but would soon meet a bump in the road. He would lose his job at the oil company in January of 1933, and immediately afterwards, Austria would ban the Nazi Party. Eichmann had no job and no longer had any prospects in Austria. However, he did have friends in high places within the party, so he picked up his family and moved over to Germany. Shortly after he arrived, he joined the German intelligence agency branch of the SS, or the SD for short. The SD gave him a new position and gave him his first assignment. He was to go after the Freemasons in Germany. The SS and the new German government did not like any other group other than themselves operating within the German borders. So they condemned them, made up conspiracy theories, and tried to shut them down. Eichmann and his thugs seized ritualistic items from the Masons and made notes about every member of the organization in Germany to be used against them at a later date. Eichmann then took their items and made an anti-Masonic exhibit, adding insult to injury by displaying the secrets of the Masonic order. But for Eichmann, this action would be very fruitful. His exhibit had attracted the attention of several high-ranking Nazi officials, such as Hermann Göring, Heinrich Himmler, and Baron Leopold von Mildenstein. That's one of those names.
Damn, Ryan. I'm proud of you, my friend. You made it past the first tongue twister.
They were all greatly impressed by his attention to detail and his info-gathering capabilities. And Mildenstein was so impressed that he invited him to take a job at the Jewish department. Eichmann agreed and went into his new job with great zeal. By 1935, Eichmann was put in charge of surveilling several Jewish organizations, all the while gathering every scrap of info he could compile and make dossiers about them. His time surveilling these organizations earned him a reputation as an expert on all things Jewish, which gave him an audience with other Nazi leaders, as they planned to deport all German Jews to Palestine. However, plans changed in 1939. When Germany violated the sovereignty of Europe and invaded Poland, absorbing the country into their sinister plans and absorbing their large Jewish population, which meant that the Nazis had even more Jewish people under their rule, and they wanted them all gone. Their goal was to remove all Jewish people from their homes, seize all of their assets, and deport them to the edges of German-occupied territory. But the Nazis needed someone to facilitate such a plan. Eichmann was the man that they needed, and they made him head of the Central Office of Jewish Immigration. Eichmann would know what?
Ryan can say Goober Fuckstein, but can't say facilitate. It's all good.
I have a quick question for
Sure.
you, and perhaps this is where I fell short in my education.
Mm-hmm.
I do not recall at this moment, why was the SS Why had they laid the blame of all things wrong with Germany at the feet of the Jewish people?
I mean, it was just, I think that was just their MO. Like they were, like I said, they were just nationalistic racists who decided that they didn't like certain groups of people. That's pretty much the long and the short of it.
I was sifting through
Now-
my brain here, and I could not come up with if I had ever been told the reason that was just all laid at the feet of the Jewish people.
Well, there was also like throughout Europe for decades, even before then, there was a lot of anti-Semitism rampant and all throughout the continent.
Right.
And I think they just seized upon that and just right place, right time, and
They
put
decided
everything
that
into
they
action.
would make a common enemy, and they just
Mhm.
was like, "You will
Right.
work."
Mm-hmm.
Pretty
Okay.
well,
And they were trying to remove everybody.
because of the nationalist views that they had. I mean,
Mhm.
you're talking about like they see them as like, you don't belong here. Why are you here?
Right.
We're the
Right.
quote unquote purebred assholes.
Yeah, we are the
And
purebreds. We
you-
are. Yeah.
You don't need to be here. So we're going to put all this blame on you so that we can have a tangible thing to hate. Because
Right.
of
We
what
have,
and
you
they-
have to have a
yeah.
common enemy in order
Yeah,
to have a movement.
Yeah.
Right. There has to be
And-
something everyone can unite against. But I did not
Well-
ever recall it being why it was laid at the feet of the Jewish people to be the enemy of the SS.
Well, they also believe that they came from like this very pure stock, and they believe that all of these immigrants that came into Germany from all of these other places kind of muddied their stock, is what they believed. And so it wasn't. I mean, it was primarily Jewish people, but it was gypsies. It was
Black people, gay people,
yeah,
Jewish people,
handicapped people, like
Yep,
everybody that they believed.
it was
they
anyone that
decided-
wasn't basically white boy.
pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, if you weren't blonde haired, blue eyed, and white, they did not like you, basically.
Okay.
Which is funny because a lot of them weren't. But anyway, that's
Yeah.
besides the point. So Eichmann would no doubt excel in his new position. He set to work right away looking for places to deport the Jewish population, even proposing a plan to resettle millions of Jewish families in Madagascar, far from their homes and far from any Aryans. But the plan was ultimately nixed in 1941 when the German deportation policy took a darker and more ominous turn. In summer of 1941, Eichmann was summoned by the Nazi brass to come directly to Berlin. Once there, he met with the head of the Nazi spy service, Reinhard Heydrich. Heydrich informed Eichmann that the policy on Jews had changed. He told him, quote, "The Fuhrer no longer wants deportation. He has ordered physical extermination." Eichmann understood what this meant. It was something the Nazis had wanted for quite some time. Heydrich then told him about death squads that he had been commanding in Poland, squads of SS men carrying out the Fuhrer's new edict. Heydrich wanted Eichmann to witness these operations, so he sent him off to Poland, where Eichmann witnessed numerous atrocities being carried out in the name of Nazism. He watched as Heydrich's death squads went into action. He watched as they systematically murdered Jews, gypsies, communists, and anyone else the state deemed subversive. He also watched as many families were rounded up and put into the back of vans, where exhaust fumes were pumped inside to suffocate them. If that wasn't enough, he was sent to the Ukraine to witness another method of mass murder. He watched as hundreds of people were forced into massive pits, ordered to strip naked, and shot like dogs in the street. While initially taken aback by this new state-sponsored brutality, Eichmann still bought into it wholeheartedly and supported the mass extermination. For his support and loyalty, Eichmann was promoted to the lieutenant colonel of the SS and made the head of the IVB department, the unit responsible for the deportation and extermination of the Jewish people in Nazi-controlled Europe. Like his previous jobs, Eichmann took this one very seriously. His bosses had given him orders to carry out, and Eichmann would do so via a four-pronged attack.
Piece of shit.
Yeah, absolutely. When a new or existing territory came under Nazi control, Eichmann would enact his four-step attack plan in order to dehumanize and demoralize its inhabitants, particularly the Jewish community. Step number 1 was the infamous yellow star. All Jews were required to wear a yellow Star of David, so they could easily be identified and restricted from participating in society, keeping them from holding certain jobs, traveling, or even using the phone or radio. Step number 2 was the seizure of all of the Jewish people's wealth. Every last Jewish business was shut down and taken over by the Reich. Their assets were seized and used to fund the German war machine. Individual bank accounts were frozen, seized, and added to the Nazi war chest, further demoralizing the Jewish community, taking everything they had worked so hard for, leaving them all penniless. Step number 3 was removing Jews from their homes and placing them in ghettos, taking yet another piece away from their lives and forcing them to live right on top of each other in walled-off sections of the cities reserved just for Jewish people, keeping them away from the lives they had previously known and forcing them to live in cramped, unsanitary conditions. And to add insult to injury, Eichmann would visit these areas and, in an effort to deceive Jewish leaders, meet with them and assure them that no harm would come to their communities, and tell them that the unsanitary conditions and restrictions were just a temporary precaution. But little did they know, step 4 was right around the corner. Step 4 was the forced internment in the labor and death camps. After the Jewish community had been removed from civic life, the Nazis made the move to remove them completely. Men, women, and children were told they were being moved as a safety precaution and were loaded into boxcars and sent to perish in the numerous labor and death camps throughout the continent, effectively wiping out whole families and communities off of the face of the earth. Unfortunately, this was the fate after so many numerous nations fell under Nazi rule. And in 1944, the nation of Hungary fell into Eichmann's crosshairs. As the regime assumed control of the country, Eichmann would enact his plan from March until July, attempting to do what he had done so many times before, but not everything went according to plan. On July the 2nd, 1944, the Allies struck Budapest in a vicious air raid. With a strike force of over 750 bombers, they hammered strategic Nazi targets, pulverizing them into oblivion. But as the air raid silence wailed, Eichmann ran for cover to his newly acquired hilltop villa that he had commandeered from a Jewish businessman. Hiding like the rat that he was, Eichmann stayed in his hole, only emerging after the bombs had stopped falling.
Yeah, he could have just stayed out in the middle of it and just been blown to pieces, and
Right.
everything would have been fucking great. That's just me.
I'm with you on that one. When he walked out to surveil the damage, he found that not only had the bombs fallen, the Allies had left something else behind. Numerous leaflets littered the ground. Eichmann picked one up and read it silently to himself, and what he read spelled doom for the Nazis. It informed Eichmann that the Russians were closing in from the east and that the Americans had landed in the west. The Nazis' days were numbered, but Eichmann was undaunted and continued his work. While he was continuing his awful work, the rest of the world was learning about the Nazis' crimes. By August of 1944, the President of the United States of America, FDR, had issued an edict saying that the persecution and harming of Jews in Hungary must end, and if not, those who orchestrated and continued to facilitate such activity would be punished. The edict and the Russians takeover of Romania put the fear of God into the Reich, because Heinrich Himmler himself ordered Eichmann to disband his unit and leave the Jewish community alone. But Eichmann refused to listen and remained in Hungary, defiantly carrying out his sinister plans. He bided his time, waiting for another opportunity to strike, which presented itself in October of that year.
So this motherfucker's just sitting over here like, I mean, you're talking about Himmler. You're talking about the right-hand man.
Yeah.
I mean, if you will.
As evil, if not more evil than Adolf Hitler.
Right. Being like, hey, knock it the fuck off. Like, quit. Just be gone, leave him alone. And he's like a big F you.
Yeah, he's like, I don't care, keep doing it.
Yeah, that actually was part of my question. Was so he was operating without the approval of the Fuhrer?
So I think at this point,
because that seems really dangerous. If the dictator says no go and you keep going, that seems like that can bring a little bit of trouble to your doorstep.
It does, but I think at this point, you know, and I could be wrong, but this is just from what I understand. It was not as organized at that point as it had been, because
it was in disarray.
Well, you're in 1944, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I'm in October of 1944.
Yeah, so you're like you're getting towards
getting close, because by April the war's over. Well, European theater's over.
I was gonna say you're within about 6 months.
Yeah.
You know, of things being kaput.
Yeah, America's about jumping there.
Yeah, so,
like, listen.
Okay, I could kind of see where he might try to take.
You know,
stand against the
there
party.
were and that's the thing too, is like there were so many members of the SS that believed in this so fervently. There are stories of them taking matters into their own hands. Like I believe there was a battle at a castle, like the last battle of World War II in the European theater, where SS men had taken over this castle, and former German enlisted men joined with actual Allied forces to fight them and take the castle and to wipe them out. So these people really were believing in what they were being sold and what they, what they thought. So he's just an asshole. He's just I'm going to stick around and do no matter what. You can tell me no, but I'm going to continue to do this because he believes in this.
Mass stupidity. A lot of herd mentality.
Sounds like motherfucking tiny dick energy is what it sounds like.
But, absolutely. That's the whole of Nazism is tiny dick energy. So, all right. So, in October of that year, the Soviets were getting extremely close to Budapest. They had fought their way across Eastern Europe, beating back the Nazi scourge and putting them on the defensive. Rumors and reports about the Russians' advance began circulating in the ghettos. There was a glimmer of hope amongst the Jewish community. Perhaps they weren't doomed after all. Perhaps the Russians would reach them and drive the Nazis out. However, their hopes were dashed when Eichmann and his men resurfaced. Eichmann walked right up to one of the Jewish leaders and proclaimed, "See, I am back." And Eichmann and his goon squad immediately rounded up all of the Jews in the ghetto. And normally, Eichmann would have put them on a train and sent them to a death camp. But because the Allied bombing had destroyed all of the train lines, Eichmann and his men forced 27,000 people to march to a labor camp and meet their doom. With no food, insufficient clothing, and no shelter. After a while, the sick and weak began struggling to keep up, where they were shot and left behind to die. Eichmann was satisfied with his cruelty and reveled in his mistreatment of these people. Eichmann continued with this type of cruelty and work until April of 1945, when it was completely evident that the days of the Third Reich were absolutely numbered. Mm-hmm. Eichmann sped back to Berlin to destroy as many records as possible, trying to erase or minimize his paper trail of mass destruction. Once he destroyed as much as he could, he went back to his home in Austria, pulled his wife and children aside, and told him that this was the end of the line, and that he would have to flee in order to avoid punishment from the Allies. He said his goodbyes and left home a newly wanted man. Shortly after his departure, Eichmann procured a set of false documents. In them, he had his name changed to Otto Eichmann. So anytime he was accused of being Adolf Eichmann, he could say, "No, see, my passport says Otto Eichmann. I'm not Adolf Eichmann. What are you talking about?" His documents also covered his involvement in the SS. They said he was just a lowly Luftwaffe pilot, which is the German Air Force. And said he was just a lowly Luftwaffe pilot and not one of the stewards of destruction that had wreaked havoc across Europe for the past however many years. For now, he was safe and no one knew his secret. But not long afterwards, Eichmann is captured by the U.S. forces, where his false documents serve him well. The U.S. forces examine his papers and everything seems to be right to them as far as they know. And not knowing he was a former SS member, the Americans put him to work in a POW camp. But as Eichmann is in U.S. custody, the first of the Nuremberg trials begins and Eichmann's name is brought up. Eichmann is terrified that his captors will soon figure out his identity. So he escapes from the POW camp and flees once more. He finds another group of Nazi sympathizers to forge a new set of documents for him. This time, he dons the name of Otto Henninger and moves deep into the German forest, where he gets a job in the German forestry industry.
What a fucking idiot. My first name was Otto. I think now that I've been captured, I think I'll go with Otto again. Fucking anyways, whatever. I have nothing nice to say about this guy, by the way. No. So everything's just going to be fuck him. He's a tool and an asshole. So,
and as you will see, not very smart. No. As the story goes along. I mean, yeah. So while he is hiding in the forest, the Nuremberg trials roll on. Although the trials had brought several Nazis to justice, there were still several Nazis that managed to slip through the cracks. That did not sit too well with the victims of their cruelty. So many Holocaust survivors formed gangs of Nazi hunters all across Europe, looking high and low for the monsters who skirted their punishment. Yeah. Eichmann caught wind of the Nazi hunters of all of this, and the Nazi hunters, when Nazi hunters went to his home where his wife was living and raided it. Sorry, let me rewind. Eichmann caught wind of this as Nazi hunters raided his wife's home. He knew he had to leave or he would face a hangman's rope. So he again went on the lam to escape his pursuers. But like previous times, he had help when he ran. Nazi sympathetic Catholic bishops had organized quote-unquote rat lines, which were to help multiple Nazi war criminals escape to Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So Eichmann got into contact with them and used one of their routes, traveling between and lodging in several safe houses and monasteries across Europe, until he made his way to Italy, where his friends in the church helped him secure a passport under the name of Riccardo Clement. Eichmann uses his passport to hop on a ship in June of 1950, bound for the extremely Nazi-friendly country of Argentina. There he would start over. And
yeah, Argentina, we got to talk at some point, okay?
Shelley needs a one-on-one sit down at some point.
Knock that shit off, Argentina.
There he would start over and blend into the background. He was far from Nazi hunters looking for revenge. Eichmann settles into his new country and carves out a nice little life for himself. He begins working at an entry-level position at the Mercedes plant, eventually working his way up to management. Eichmann has his house built for he and his family, and after 2 years, sends for his wife and kids. For the time being...
That should have been a dead giveaway.
I mean, yes, but no. I mean, like, if he's using aliases and they have these rat lines and they have all these, like, different routes to get out of Europe, and as you'll see, it's going to take a freaking team of spies to get his ass. For the time being, Eichmann had escaped prosecution. He thought he'd beaten the system and gotten away with everything, but justice waits for no man, as we will soon find out. Eichmann didn't realize it yet, but Jewish agents had been tailing him since the end of the war. As early as 1945, renowned Nazi hunter and Mauthausen survivor Simon Wiesenthal was gunning for him. Wiesenthal was a victim of Eichmann and his ilk. Since the end of World War II, Wiesenthal compiled a list of several notorious Nazis. He made it his duty to hunt down every single last one of them. And as soon as Wiesenthal had a chance, he met with U.S. Army officials in 1947 and passed his list on, hoping that they would assist him in his pursuits. The officials were so impressed, they hired him to work with the War Crimes Unit and helped him hunt down more than a dozen SS officers. The commander of the unit saw that Wiesenthal really had a knack for this, so he transferred him to the Office of Strategic Services, or the OSS for short, which is like the precursor to the CIA.
Mm-hmm.
Wiesenthal now had an unfettered access to the OSS files. Taking advantage of his new position, he dug furiously through their files with one target in mind: Adolf Eichmann. Although the OSS files on Eichmann were scant, Wiesenthal gathered what he could and began to build his file on the war criminal. He began to track down new leads and ask around about his new target. But very little information came to him in the first several months. Other than a few rumors and whispers, Eichmann was still a ghost in the wind. A few months later, a newly formed Israeli government gave him a list of Nazi war criminals. They had compiled the list because these guys were still fugitive and they had to pay the piper. At the very top of their list was Eichmann's name. A few nights later, while working on a few of his cases at home, Wiesenthal pulled out the list and pored over it. His landlady came by for a visit and saw Eichmann's name on the top of the document. She remarked to Wiesenthal that Eichmann's parents actually lived close by. As a matter of fact, they were only a few doors down. Wiesenthal couldn't believe his luck. The slipperiest of war criminals in all of Europe's parents lived right down the street from him.
What?
Yeah.
I guess I've never heard that portion of the story.
I don't believe I have either.
This
Yeah.
man.
Is it Wiesenthal or is it Wiesenthal?
Wiesenthal, I believe.
Either
it could
way.
be Wiesenthal. Yeah. I don't know.
I was just curious. I've heard it, and every time it sounded, it seems like I remember Wiesenthal as the Nazi hunter. So I don't know. We'll say it can be said either way, because
Yeah, like I said, there's going to be a lot of those names in this story.
Yeah.
So this man who just happens to compile all of this stuff, he's like, I'm going to go get him. I'm going to hunt him. Goes through all this trouble, has access to the files, all this stuff, and then boom, all of a sudden his parents live a few doors down.
Yeah, by happenstance, Eichmann's parents live a few doors down.
The fuck, man?
Because the landlady was being nosy.
And she was like, oh, the Eichmanns. Oh, I know who they are. He's right over here.
I love this landlady. She's like, oh, yeah, I know those people.
So Wiesenthal immediately contacted the higher-ups over at the OSS. And on July the 28th, 2 OSS agents were knocking at Eichmann's parents' door. Eichmann's father answered and let the 2 agents into the home. The agents interrogated the old man, who reluctantly confirmed that Adolf Eichmann was indeed his son. However, he claimed not to know about his son's wartime activities. And he also claimed not to know his whereabouts. The agents searched his home looking for a shred of evidence that would lead to Adolf's capture, but didn't find so much as a photo in the home. They asked the old man for a photo of his son, and the elder Eichmann claimed that his son never really liked taking photos, so he didn't have any. The agents knew he was lying, but couldn't do anything else. So they left the old man's house empty-handed, knowing they were going to need a picture if they were going to hunt this scumbag down.
That's when you toss the house and apologize later.
I mean...
Well, you said that they searched the house, though, right?
They searched the whole home. Yeah, they were tossing the house. They didn't find anything. And so he sent them on their way. Yeah. I mean, that's very suspicious, obviously. You don't have a photo of your son. You don't know where your son is. You don't know about what happened with your son's wartime activities. Okay.
I mean, never mind.
What were you going to say?
Because I don't want to be one of those people that like, okay, we that lumps his parents in with him, and stuff like that. So I'm trying to sit here and think of like, maybe they didn't. Playing devil's advocate here. Maybe they didn't have a photo of him. Maybe they had photos only when he was a kid, and then he went off and did some crazy shit, and they were like, yeah, we're not about that. But
I mean, I guess that's a possibility, but I don't know. I would be suffice to say.
I think it's highly improbable. Let me put it out there. I think it's highly improbable. However, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I'd be suffice to say probably not, but I know what you're saying.
I'm like, if he's hiding his son, and biggest piece of shit as well. So
oh yeah,
gonna go ahead and put that out there.
I'm sure. I mean, he learned it from somewhere, so.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing they were going to need a picture if they were going to catch this scumbag, unfortunately not knowing where to get one. However, their fortunes changed later that year when Jewish agent, his name is Manus Diamant, made contact with one of Eichmann's former mistresses. Using an assumed name and forged documents, Diamant went to Austria. He went with the sole purpose of tracking down Maria Mosenbacher, a woman who often bragged about being involved with a high-ranking Nazi during the war. After painstaking legwork and research, it was clear she was talking about Eichmann. So Diamant tracked her down and followed her for a week, waiting to strike. His opening would come when Maria dropped several bags of groceries. Diamant swooped in and helped her gather them up and walked her home and instantly gained her trust. After he got her trust, he wined and dined her for a few weeks, hoping she would slip up and open up about her former boyfriend. And finally, one night at her apartment, she broke out an old photo album. She showed Diamant pictures of her friends and family, but eventually she turned to a page that Diamant and every Nazi hunter in Europe had waited for. There on the page was a handsome man in his early 30s. She stopped on the picture and looked over at Diamant, and she said, "This is Adolf. He was my boyfriend. Who knows what happened to him? He probably didn't survive the war. If he did, he would have contacted me by now." Diamant's veins filled with ice water. Here in front of him was the face of pure evil. The next morning, Diamant left and took the photo directly to Simon Wiesenthal. Now that they had a face to the beast, they were hunting. Diamant and Wiesenthal thought for sure it would yield more on info about Eichmann's whereabouts, but nothing came. He was still in the wind. However, Wiesenthal was persistent in hunting down Eichmann. Wiesenthal took all of his info and files straight to the Israeli government. He pressured the young government to pursue Eichmann, but no action was taken, and finally in 1954, the Israeli government broke the news to Wiesenthal. They did not have the time nor the resources to chase Eichmann down. If they did not have a definite location, they weren't looking into it. They were not going to chase rumors in the dark. A disheartened Wiesenthal went back to Europe and closed his office. He couldn't believe the monster had slipped through his fingers. Somewhere in the world, Eichmann was living a full life with no consequence for the millions he had slaughtered. The trail went stone cold and all hope was lost. That is until 1956. In Buenos Aires, Argentina, a young girl named Sylvia Hermann began dating a German boy named Nick Clement. In December of that year, she decided to bring him home for dinner. They had been dating for a while and thought it was a good idea to introduce Nick to her father. Nick came to the house and was introduced to Sylvia's father, Lothar. Nick was just happy to be in the home of native Germans. So he felt very comfortable and began speaking quite freely. While taking great care not to mention his father's name, Nick began to brag. He spoke about how his father was a bigwig Nazi during the war and said that it was a shame the Germans didn't accomplish their goals in regards to the Jewish people.
Oh, fuck this guy.
Yeah. The whole time he is bragging, Lothar remained silent. Because Nick didn't know it at the time, but Lothar was himself a Jew. He had spent time in concentration camps and immigrated to Argentina after his release. Nick's comments deeply hurt Lothar, but he remained friendly and cordial until the end of dinner, and after dinner, Sylvia was embarrassed and decided to break it off with Nick, but remained friendly with him. I mean, I think I would too. You bring a freaking secret Nazi to the house that starts talking a bunch of shit, and your dad, was in a concentration
Why would
camp.
you stay friends with him? That's what girls walk away.
Yeah.
I mean, if you
No.
Okay. The only way that I could see it happen is if she is trying to gather more information because maybe her and I'm not trying to jump around the story, but might possibly her father is a lot more involved with this Nazi hunting and everything like that. So maybe she's trying to keep the tie so she can gather the information later on.
Could be.
And if that's what she's doing, I fucking love this chick.
I
love all this crap like this where it's like the guy, when he went down and wine and dined the one lady, trying to get her to slip up. Yeah, like hell yeah. Come on, you're gonna get what you want.
So she's playing a honeypot trap, huh?
She just might be.
All right.
We're gonna
we
find
can't
out.
jump
I will reserve judgment on that.
A few months later, Sylvia and her father were relaxing at home. Sylvia was reading her father the newspaper when she came across an article about Nazi war criminals. In the article, it detailed how several Nazis were still at large, but one of the names stuck out, Adolf Eichmann. Could that be Nick's father, she thought? Lothar was sure of it. Adolf had to be Nick's father. So Lothar drafted a letter to Fitz Bauer to tell him about the lead that they had. Now, Fitz Bauer was mentioned in the article as the prosecutor of the war crime trials in West Germany. If anyone could help positively identify Eichmann, it would be him. Fritz received the letter and wasted no time responding. He sent a letter back with several photos of Eichmann and descriptions of his sons. Nick matched the description provided by Bauer. There was no doubt in their mind that they were dealing with the Eichmanns. However, they needed to make sure that Adolf was still living with them. So Sylvia and Lothar devised a plan. Sylvia would go to Eichmann's home and get a positive ID on Nick's father. She would get a good look at him and report back to Bauer. A few weeks later, they put their plan into motion. Sylvia took the bus over to Nick's neighborhood. She was going to drop by his house in the guise of paying Nick a visit. Sylvia had seen Nick's home before, but had never been invited in or had never met his parents. Nonetheless, she walked right up to the door and knocked. The door opened and she was greeted by a short woman. Sylvia said she was a friend of Nick's and asked if he was home. The woman said she was, and the woman said that he was not, and that she was his mother, but Nick would be back later on. However, she invited Sylvia in for an afternoon snack. Sylvia obliged and stepped inside. Once inside the house, she sat down and an old man entered the room. He was older and worse for wear than the man in the photograph that Sylvia had seen, but she was sure it was Adolf Eichmann. She was literally standing in front of a monster. She somehow managed to keep her composure, but the brevity of the moment wasn't lost on her. The man said hello and made Sylvia's acquaintance. Sylvia introduced herself and asked if he was Nick's father. The man paused for half a second and said, "No, I'm Nick's uncle." Sylvia knew he was lying, but chatted with him anyway for a few minutes when suddenly Nick burst through the door. He was surprised that Sylvia had come by and asked what she was doing there. Sylvia said she had come to see him, but she had to go. The older man walked Nick and Sylvia to the door, and as they were walking out the door, Nick turned to the man and said, quote, "Thank you, Father. I'll walk her to the bus." Nick walked Sylvia to the bus and made sure she got on. Sylvia had heard what Nick said to the old man, and it swirled around inside her head as she rode the bus back to her house. There was absolutely no doubt that Adolf Eichmann was alive. Sylvia returned to her father, and the two wrote Fritz Bauer relating the info they had just gathered. Bauer related Bauer related Lothar and Sylvia's story to an Israeli foreign minister. The foreign minister contacted Isser Harel to tell him about the Eichmann sighting. Harel was the head of the Mossad, Israel's secret intelligence agency, basically Israel's CIA.
Mm-hmm.
But he wanted to be sure that Eichmann was in fact alive before the Mossad made a move. So in January of 1958, Harel sent Mossad agent Yoel Goren to Argentina. He was to surveil the home at the address that Lothar and Sylvia provided Bauer at 4261 Chacabuco Street in Buenos Aires, Arkansas. Buenos Aires.
Don't go there either, people.
Yeah, don't go there.
It's not good. Just
no.
Just,
Buenos Aires, Arkansas. Don't do it. Argentina.
Damn, that's almost bad or as worse as yeah.
Facilitated. So Goren arrived to watch the home and thought it seemed a bit run down. It did not seem like it was a home that someone like Eichmann would live in. Goren reported back to Harel about it and about the comings and goings from the little residence, but no one matching Eichmann's description was seen leaving or going to the residence. Harel was a bit disheartened by the information, so he sent more Mossad agents to Argentina to interview Lothar and Sylvia because he wanted to see if they were trustworthy and see what they knew. After the interview, they found that both Sylvia and Lothar could be trusted and convinced them to do a bit more digging into for the Mossad. They were instructed that if they found anything to contact the Mossad directly. So Sylvia and Lothar began looking into land records to see if there was anything linking the Eichmanns to the home. After some digging, they found the house on Chacabuco Street set on land belonging to a Francisco Schmidt. Lothar tracked down the person that sold the land to Schmidt. The description that the person gave of Schmidt matched Eichmann's description. So they did as instructed, and Lothar wrote the Mossad with his findings. Harel got the information and had another Mossad agent check into the lead. But they found that Schmidt was not Eichmann, so the Mossad dropped the case and told Bauer they were no longer pursuing it. Once again, the slippery Eichmann had avoided capture.
It seems like they're not even trying.
Well, I think it just seems like lack of resources. Like, you have countries that are trying to rebuild after the war, and you also have a new fledgling nation in Israel. Like, they're trying to, set up their government. And I think that they are trying to focus on setting everything up and trying to rebuild. They don't want to go chase down people if they don't have to focus that money in that direction. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would go chase down someone who potentially was one of the few that single-handedly caused the destruction of the country to begin with.
I would too, but I think
to go.
In the Mossad's case, I think they wanted to be doubly sure before they could even move. They wanted to, because you have a lot of convincing to do. You have to talk to the government. The government has to be like, okay, go do this thing. If there's evidence is shaky at best, the government's just going to be like, why are you even talking to me? So they want to be able to make sure that it's even worth their time to look into. So I think that's what's going on.
That's why he fled from Buenos Aires, Arkansas to Tijuana, Oklahoma.
Yeah, that's right.
if you're listening to
Oklahoma, they'll get you there.
If you're listening to us for a history lesson to pass your test, good luck. You just flunked. But if you can pinpoint Tijuana, Oklahoma on a map, you're my new best friend.
So just because the Mossad gave up on the investigation did not mean that Fritz Bauer did. He was certain that Harel and his team had missed a grand opportunity, so he continued to work the case and caught a break in December of 1959. Bauer had made a contact with someone high up in the German government. Bauer's source was so top secret that it has never been revealed even to this day. But this source provided Bauer with information so crucial to the case that he had to take it directly to the Israeli government. Bauer called them and told them his source revealed the name Eichmann used to immigrate and live in Argentina. So they set up a meeting to discuss Bauer's information. He would travel to Israel and meet with the Israeli Attorney General, Haim Cohen, and once again meet with the Mossad director, Harel, where he would reveal Eichmann's alias. A few days later, the men sat down for a meeting. Bauer told the two Jewish officials that Eichmann was in fact alive. Not only that, but he was living in Argentina, and they had been on the right track the whole time. But the most damning bombshell was yet to be dropped. Eichmann had used a fake passport to get out of Europe, and the name on that passport was Ricardo Clement. Bauer told the Mossad to use the info to bring him down, and he also gave them a staunch warning. If the Mossad did not get their man, Bauer would personally make sure that he did, and expedite him back to West Germany to stand trial. Harrell assured him that they would, and he would put his best men on the job. So Cohen and Harrell consorted and agreed that the man for the job should be a senior agent. The man was a top agent in the Mossad named Zvi Aroni. The Mossad got their plan together and sent Aroni to Argentina. He arrived in country on March the 1st, 1960 with forged documents, concealing his identity and identifying him as Mr. Rodan from the Foreign Ministry. Yes, Rodan, like from Godzilla. Argentinian officials could not know who he was or what he was there to do, so he could be very discreet and cover his tracks. Aroni wasted no time and began surveilling the residence at Chacabuco Street. He needed to see if Eichmann still lived there. The house looked unkempt and like it hadn't been lived in for a while, so he sent a 20-year-old kid that volunteered to help the Mossad to check it out. The kid went over and had a look around and saw painters in the home. Eichmann had moved and was no longer there, but Aroni was determined to get answers. He hadn't traveled halfway across the globe for nothing. The next day, Aroni sent another Mossad contact named Juan. Juan had a package with him and a cover story to get info on Eichmann. Juan was to go to the house with a package addressed to Nick Clement and ask for info on how to get it to him. Juan did just as he was told and talked to the workman in the home. He asked the workman where the Clements had gone because he had a package for them. The workman said that they had moved to the San Fernando neighborhood, and Juan asked the workman if he could take him there. He said he could. He said no, but he could take him to a nearby garage where one of the Clements worked. So Clement and Eichmann will kind of be interchangeable here. The workman took Juan down to the garage. He introduced Juan to Dito Clement, who happened to be Nick's brother. Juan told Dito that he had gone back to Nick's old house to drop off a package for him, but when no one was there, he had the workman bring him down to the garage. Juan then asked the family where they had moved. Where the family had moved. Dito reluctantly grumbled that they had moved down to Don Corchado. What?
Nothing.
No, yeah, tell me now.
Fucking Shelly, ask her.
What'd you do?
I said nothing.
You didn't say anything. You made a face. What'd you do? You did
No,
something.
I didn't.
Uh-huh.
Continue on with your fabulous story.
Fabulous story.
I don't want to read it now.
We were talking about Vi Sharona or somebody hunting Nazis.
My Sharona.
I think everybody got the joke whenever I said it right.
Damn. Oh my God.
Vi Sharoni or whatever his name was.
Oh, season three. Okay.
We got it.
You got it. We had
what the hell's his last name now?
pepperoni.
It's Vi Aroni.
Vi Aroni.
Got it.
Yes.
Vi Aroni is
Vi
okay.
Aroni.
He's gonna
Vi
go find
Aroni.
him. The spy Vi Aroni, yeah.
Yes.
Let's just not say the name Daiko anymore.
Dito.
Dito.
Yes.
Oh, see, I thought he was saying Daiko.
No, it's Dito. Dito or Dito.
Dito.
Not
See,
Dito.
I completely misheard.
And that's what
where the
made
giggle came
Shelly.
from.
Yeah, that's what made
'Cause I'm like,
Shelly
did
giggle.
he say that? Dito. Got it.
Dito.
That's not
D-I-T-O.
That's not nearly as funny as the other way.
So Juan asked if he had the address so he could deliver the package to Nick. Dito shook his head and told him that there's no street addresses out there. So Juan gave him the package and said give it to Nick for him. Dito reluctantly agreed, and Juan left to report back to Aroni. Aroni was very excited about the news that Juan told him. Based on the info, they knew the general location of Adolf Eichmann. The address had been listed for him previously. The address that had been listed for him previously was his, and now they knew where one of his boys worked. Further surveillance was needed, but Eichmann's trail was white hot. This was the closest anyone had been to the monster in years. The next day, Aroni and Juan began watching Dito's shop. They hoped they would catch him leaving and it would lead them back to the Eichmann home. On the third afternoon, a black moped left the shop being driven by an older man with a young blonde dude on the back. Juan pointed out the man on the back and said it was Dito. The two men began to trail the moped, following it through city streets, winding through alleys, and across intersections. eventually making it to the center of San Fernando, where Aroni was stopped by a funeral procession, losing the moped and its 2 riders. Aroni slammed his hand on the steering wheel out of anger. This wasn't working, so he devised another plan. He told Juan to go back to the Eichmann's old house and speak to the workmen. Tell them that the person that gave you the package said it wasn't delivered and now they're demanding money from you, so you need the address for the Clements' new house to prove that it was delivered. Juan again did as he was told, and the workman told him that he didn't know the address, but he would tell him how to get there. So the workman told him where the new house was and what it looked like. It was brick, but unfinished with a flat roof. He said that there was a kiosk near there, and if you walked up to the kiosk and asked for the German, they would point him in the direction of the home. Juan thanked the workman for the help and left. But he decided to stop by the garage and press Dido further with the same story. Dido became very angry with Juan and when he walked into the garage. He was the last person that Dido wanted to see. Juan told Dido the story that he had told the workman, and Dido got even angrier and screamed, if they wanted my brother, why didn't they use his real name? Juan asked him what his real name was and was able to get Dido to spill the beans. But the name was one that Juan didn't recognize. So he ran back to Aroni to tell him the name he got and was visibly upset. Aroni asked him what was wrong. Juan said, we told the wrong man. His last name was Eichmann, not Clement. He assured Juan that they would get the right guy, and he told Juan to tell no one about the work they had done and sent Juan on his way. The next day, Aroni used the directions the workman had given Juan, and everything he told Juan matched up perfectly. The house was brick with a flat roof and unfinished. It's set in a remote area with a smattering of other houses in the neighborhood. Everything, all the evidence was pointing him to the right direction. Aroni still needed more to make sure, so he had another Mossad associate dig into the home's land records. They found the house was located on Garibaldi Street, and the plot of the land it set on belonged to Veronica Eichmann. All Aroni needed was to spot Ricardo Clement and to make sure that he was Adolf Eichmann. The next day, Aroni drove by the house and saw an older man, about 50-something, come out of the house and take clothes off the clothesline. Aroni knew exactly who the man was. After hours of staring at Eichmann's file, he had memorized that face. It was most assuredly him. They had Eichmann sniffed out. Aroni contacted Director Harrell back in Tel Aviv. He let Harrell know that he had located Eichmann, and Harrell was proud of his agent, but now had the task of assembling an extraction team. This team would have to be spot on. There was no room for error. Argentina was full of former Nazis in high places. If these scumbags got a chance to torture a Jew again, they would jump at it. So they somehow had to extract Eichmann without being detected. While Harrell was working on the logistics of this plan, Aroni was still gathering more info so the extraction team could go smoothly. He wanted to get an updated picture of Eichmann so it would be easier to identify him and capture him. While he waited for Eichmann to show himself again, Aroni took several photos of the area and Eichmann's house. He also made maps of the neighborhood for the extraction team. When he finally did catch Eichmann outside, he was too far away for a good photo. So the ever-crafty Aroni came up with another plan. On Sunday, April 3rd, Aroni met with another Mossad contact. His name was Rendy, and Aroni gave him a briefcase camera. He told Rendy to walk to Eichmann's neighborhood under the guise of looking for land to buy. If he should happen to see Eichmann, approach him and strike up a conversation, and while talking to him, snap several pictures of him. Much of their excitement as Rendy began to walk the neighborhood, Eichmann and his son Dido were in the front yard. Rendy approached the Germans and asked about purchasing a home for his family in the neighborhood. Eichmann spoke with Rendy warmly about the area, and he spoke with him for a good 5 minutes like he was an old friend. The whole time, Rendy was snapping pictures of Eichmann in his front yard. Now the
camera was in the briefcase, correct?
It was a briefcase camera, yep.
So what do you do? Hold that briefcase up and click, click, click?
I don't know the logistics.
I'm trying to figure out how the briefcase camera works.
You carry it like. Hold on, let me get a book. It's like you carry it like the book, or if the book was the briefcase, instead of doing like holding up and snapping, you carry it long ways. The camera's right here, so you just keep
angling it up. Like, excuse me, sir. Can you please? Would you mind looking at this latch?
I mean, you like point over, look over that way. Snap.
Got me.
They got you.
We're having all kinds of technical issues. We just lost Shelly. I lost my audio. Hold on one second.
It's fine.
Are you still
It's
no
fine.
audio still?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm because sorry for snickering and smiling over here. Our viewers are having a field day with these freaking names in the comments.
I'm telling you, man. I know it's a fucking.
It's probably a good thing I can't see the comments.
You just wait, because it's about to get very name heavy here in just a second. So.
Oh God! Oh Jesus!
Yeah.
We've already got
Okay,
rice,
so-
pepperoni,
I know.
all of that. Go. Okay.
All right.
All right, so the briefcase camera, he's caught the picture of the
He's
dude.
got the picture. He's got the picture of the guy that they need, so they can proceed. With the surveillance mission complete, Harold ordered Aroni back to Israel. Aroni hopped on the next plane out of Argentina. As he was switching planes in Paris, Aroni was surprised as Harold sat down beside him. The two men pretended not to know each other until well into the flight and didn't speak. But once the plane was in the air, finally Harold looked over to Aroni and asked him, quote, "Are you sure this is our guy?" Aroni said without a doubt and handed Harold the picture he had taken. And Harold said, "Well, if that's the case, we're going to go after him." Once back in Tel Aviv, Harold began to put his extraction team together. He contacted the chief of operations of Shin Bet, the Israeli FBI, Rari Eitan, and put him in charge as the commander of the operation, and the two selected their team. They handpicked Mossad and Shin Bet agents they knew were capable of carrying out such a mission. The first on their list was Avraham Shalom, the deputy director of Shin Bet operations. He was born in Vienna and was beaten by classmates because he was Jewish. He was a master of international undercover work and was well built. The next was Shalom Dani. Dani was a master forger. He had escaped a concentration camp after making a fake pass out of toilet paper and could forge anything. He would be needed to forge all the fake documents to get in and out of Argentina. The third was Moshe Tabor. He was 6'2" and incredibly strong. He was a technical mastermind and could create trick items, and he could overhaul engines, pick locks, and build safe rooms. The fourth was Yakov Gat. He was an extremely experienced agent and was extremely level-headed and could defuse situations. Fifth was Peter Malkin. He was very strong and needed as a second heavy. He was also a master of disguise and needed to help the team blend in. Sixth was Ephraim Milani. He was a fluent speaker of Spanish and had extensive knowledge of Argentina and would translate and help the team navigate Argentinian culture. Seventh was Dr. Yona Elian. He would keep Eichmann in good health, and they would use him to get Eichmann back to Israel unharmed. Eighth was our pal Zvyroni. He had provided the intel for the mission and was a master interrogator and would interrogate Eichmann. And their final selection was Yakov Madad. He was to arrange all the cars and safe houses used by the team. Every selection was important, and it would take them all to bring Eichmann down.
And I'm going to keep away from the comments for about the next 15 minutes.
You probably should.
Go ahead, Ryan.
A few days later, the team got together and they were briefed on the mission. They were shown Eichmann's on-file photo and the most recent photo. Each of them were shocked at how much he had aged since the war. The scourge of Europe was now a wrinkled old man. The 15 years since the war had not been kind to him. Tabor suggested the team kill him on the spot when they captured him, but was immediately shut down by Eitan. Eichmann needed to make it back to Israel and needed to stand trial. The group was then briefed on local customs of Argentina so they could blend in with the Argentinians as much as possible and not draw any unwanted attention to themselves. Finally, they discussed just how they were going to grab their target. The first option being grabbing him while he was out and about. The second was a late night raid on his home, and the third was grabbing him on the street near his isolated home. The plans for extraction were in place. The massive concerted effort to grab this real-life boogeyman had begun. Come hell or high water, the agents of Israel were going to succeed. While the agents were about to travel to Argentina, Harold had to figure out how to get Eichmann back to Israel, so he contacted Yehuda Shalomi, the manager of El Al Airlines, the Israeli airline, to see if they could charter a plane to Argentina in order to pick up Eichmann and get the agents back after the completion of the mission. Shamani assured him that he could get a plane. With that loose end tied up, the mission was given the green light and could proceed. On April the 24th, Yakov Gat, Zvyroni, and Abraham Shalom arrived in the country separately, as to not arise any suspicions from the local government or from the local officials. Gat was on edge when he landed, and he believed he had compromised the mission immediately when two men stepped on his bus leaving the airport, presenting him with a picture of himself getting off the plane. His heart pounded in his chest until he realized they were just two tourism photographers and they were just trying to make a quick buck. Shalom had his own problems when he tried to check into his hotel. He was handed the clerk his forged German passport. The clerk looked at it and said, "You're a long way from Hamburg. I'm from Hamburg." Shalom spoke German, but was originally from Austria, so he spoke it with an accent. Thinking on his feet, he said he was actually from a smaller village outside of Hamburg, and the clerk looked at him in amazement and said, "What a coincidence, I'm from that village." Not wanting to incriminate himself any further, he just got really quiet, filled out all of his documents, and left to meet up with his compatriots. Aroni, Shalom, and Gat all met at the secret rendezvous point. They met with Ephraim Ilani, who was already in country. Ilani procured a safe house for the base of operations, so he took the two agents to show them. Once they were there, the three men decided to drive out to Eichmann's house just to take a look to see what they could see. Night had fallen by the time they reached the neighborhood. As they approached Route 202, they saw a man walking carrying a flashlight. As their headlights illuminated the man, they couldn't believe their luck. It was Eichmann, all alone, walking home. They could have nabbed him right then and there, but they had to be more tactful and wait for their orders. So they pulled up the road, and Gat got out of his car. They told him to tail Eichmann to see where he went. Gat tailed Eichmann through the darkness down Garibaldi Street and watched as Eichmann entered the small brick house. Gat returned to the car, and the group returned to the safe house. They immediately contacted Harold and used a code word letting him know that they had seen Eichmann. The mission could proceed. For the next few days, Aroni and Shalom set up surveillance close to Eichmann's home. They wanted to get a sense of his daily routine, and for 3 or 4 days, like clockwork, Eichmann would get off bus 203 between 7:38 and 7:40 p.m. He would turn on his flashlight and walk down the desolate street towards his home. And based on the isolated location and the cover of darkness, they decided that during his walk would be the most opportune time to nab him when the mission proceeded. Harold arrived in Argentina on May the 2nd. He listened to Aroni and Shalom's surveillance info and agreed that when Eichmann got off the bus would be a good time to strike. He also informed his men that the El Al extraction flight would leave Argentina on the 14th, so they had a very small window to get the job done. They needed to execute the act flawlessly and fast. On May the 4th, Eichmann and Malkin arrived in country. They had been delayed in Paris because of passport issues, but they finally made it to Argentina and went straight to the house and got to work with all the other agents. They were ready to get on with the plan. As the agents were getting ready, they contacted the El Al pilots just to make sure everything was still all right on their end. They informed them that it was, but there was an issue. They were not going to be able to get the plane to Argentina at the time they agreed on. So the plane would be a little late.
In this country, man?
I don't know, man. So the plane would be a little late, wouldn't be able to fly back to Israel until the 19th. Harold understood, but decided to move on with the plan as it was laid out. The operation would begin on May the 10th, no questions asked. On May the 5th, Shalom Danny arrived at the safe house and wasted no time and got to work immediately. He opened his suitcase and pulled out several inks, tools, and seals and began forming all the fake documents that they would need. After a few hours, Danny produced everything from fake driver's licenses to insurance cards and diplomatic passes. Once he was done, Moshe Tabor arrived and made fake license plates for the cars they would be using to capture Eichmann. Abraham Shalom began studying different escape routes from the Eichmann's home back to the safe house. He mapped out several alternate routes just in case their escape was compromised. Once the routes were mapped, Shalom helped Madad and Ilani locate 2 cars. One was a black sedan while the other was an old Chevy. They were very fast and unassuming, perfect for the mission. After their task was finished, the team stocked the safe houses with food just in case they were stuck for a long time with their captive and couldn't leave. They also meticulously rehearsed grabbing Eichmann in as little time as possible, repeating the situation ad nauseum until they got it down to a science. Things were ready to roll. While all of them were getting all their stuff together, Aroni was silently planning. He was figuring out the logistics and just how the team would grab Eichmann. On May the 8th, Aroni set the group down and told him his plan. He figured the best way to get Eichmann was fast and surprising as possible, so that's exactly how they were going to get him. They would park the Chevy on Route 202 with its brights on. This would blind Eichmann as he walked past the Buick parked on Garibaldi Street. The Buick would have its hood up, concealing Malkin behind it. As Eichmann walked past the Buick, Malkin would step out and say something in Spanish. Eichmann would become confused and Malkin would grab him. Tabor and Eichen would spring from the back seat and draw Eichmann into the car so they could get back to the safe house. The plan was in place, and the men continued to practice, waiting on the day. The day came on May the 11th. Each of the men were extremely nervous, but they had an important job to do. So they readied themselves and got into position to carry out their plan. Both cars full of Mossad and Shin Bet agents drove to Eichmann's neighborhood. The Buick got into position with its hood up, and the Chevy parked with its lights aimed at Route 202. The agents waited for Eichmann to get off of his bus at 7:40 p.m. But when 7:40 p.m. hit, there was no sign of the bus and no sign of Eichmann. This was incredibly odd because during the surveillance, the bus was never late. The men began to get nervous. The more time they stayed put, the more attention they would attract. Time seemed to drag as they nervously awaited his arrival. Where was Eichmann? Was he onto them? Did he change his routes? All of these thoughts raced through their heads, but finally at about 8:05, Eichmann's bus arrived. Eichmann got off his bus and began walking towards his home. Stallone turned on his headlights, illuminating the Nazi in the Argentinian night. Peter Malkin waited as Eichmann approached the Cadillac on Garibaldi Street. His heart pounded in his chest. This was his moment. He stepped out from behind the upturned hood directly in Eichmann's path and said, "Un momento, senor." Eichmann was scared and taken aback. Just as he was about to run, Malkin jumped forward and grabbed him. Both men's momentum carried them down to the ground, and Eichmann and Malkin began struggling and rolling around. And they fought and rolled into a ditch. Malkin grabbed Eichmann's throat to keep him from yelling for help. But Eichmann was able to get his hand from around his throat and free himself from Malkin's grip. He screamed for help, but Aroni revved the Buick's motor to cover the sound of Eichmann screaming. Tabor jumped out of the car to help Malkin. Malkin locked his arms around Eichmann's waist in a death grip. Tabor grabbed Eichmann's legs, and Eichmann knew his goose was cooked, so he just went limp and stopped fighting. Eichen got out and helped Malkin and Tabor get Eichmann into the car. Tabor ran around the front, slammed the hood, jumped in the passenger seat, and Aroni gunned the Buick, and the team got the hell out of Dodge and drove back to the safe house and changed the plates just so they couldn't be tracked.
You really done put in his goose was cooked, huh?
I did. His goose was cooked.
All right. Jesus.
The agents removed Eichmann from the car and led him to his room. They told him they would hold him for the next 10 days. They dressed him in loose-fitting pajamas and cuffed him to the bed. Aroni walked into the room and addressed his prisoner. He asked him what his name was. Eichmann initially said Ricardo Clement. But Aroni was wise to his tricks and asked him what his Nazi Party number was. Eichmann gave him a number that matched his number in the Nazi Party. Aroni asked him what his number was in the SS, and Eichmann again gave a matching number. Aroni asked him again, "What is your name?" Adolf Eichmann, he finally responded. Everyone was ecstatic. They had their man. Aroni asked him if he was ready to stand trial in Israel for his crimes, and Eichmann responded, "Absolutely not." He turned to Aroni and said, "Number one, I did nothing wrong. I was following orders. Number two, what have I done with it? What do I have to do with Israel? I should be put on trial in Germany or Argentina." Aroni told him that would not be the case, but assured him it would be a fair and honest trial. Whether he liked it or not, he was going back to Israel to be tried. The next day, as Eichmann lay in his cell, Peter Malkin showed up to guard him. Eichmann struck up a conversation with his captor. He asked Malkin, "Are you going to kill me?" Malkin said, "No," said Malkin. "We're going to give you a chance that you never gave your victims, a fair trial." Eichmann said, "I had my orders and I had to follow them." Malkin said back to Eichmann, "Those weren't orders. You hated your victims." Eichmann paused and said, "In a way, I love Jews." Malkin was dumbfounded. How could this monster say such a thing? He looked at Eichmann and said, "You do you? Then why were you in the SS?" Eichmann responded to Malkin and said, I wanted the Jews to have their own country. We didn't want to do anything to them. We just talked about cleaning them out of Germany, but no nation would take them. We talked about Madagascar and other plans. I even went to Palestine in 1936. Malkin was disgusted with the man before him. Even after all this time, he was completely unapologetic for what he had done to the Jewish people.
And apparently full of bullshit, too.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's like, "Oh, congratulations, you went to Palestine and Madagascar. Here's your cookie." So, while guarding
Madagascar, Florida.
I'm going to get that cookie to go with that goose that just got cooked.
Yeah. So while guarding
Right,
Eichmann, the agents
Rooney.
tried to figure out the easiest way to get him out of the country. It was decided that they would dress him as an El Al crew member and sneak him onto the plane in plain sight of everyone. It was also decided that he would be lightly sedated, so he wouldn't scream for help and compromise the mission.
Knock him out and take him in a wheelchair. That'll shut him up.
I mean, they want to be inconspicuous, though. So, like, if they
Throw
see
him in on a wheelchair, the old man's asleep. Don't wake him up.
I mean, I don't know.
There's more than one way to skin a cat since we're going in colloquialisms.
Is that a way to cook a goose, Shelley?
That is a way to cook a goose.
Okay.
So on May the 17th, Shalom Donnie once again came to the safe house, but this time it was to make a fake Israeli passport for Eichmann. Donnie took the Nazis' picture and forged a perfect passport with the name Zeev Zaccaroni onto the passport. They needed to get him on that plane. Malkin was again on guard duty the day before Eichmann's extraction. Even though Eichmann disgusted him, Malkin decided to treat him like a human. He poured Eichmann a glass of red wine and gave him a cigarette. He spoke to Eichmann and asked him why he did what he did and heard him out. Once the Nazi spilled his guts, Malkin tried to level with him. He told him that he should willingly come back to Israel and stand trial. That way, his part of the story would get out and he could plead his case. Eichmann agreed and signed a document stating he was willing to go to Israel. They had him dead to rights, and the damn fool signed a legal document. But the next morning, the El Al flight landed at the Argentinian airport. It was time to get the Nazi out of the country and on to Jewish soil. Eichmann and the agents traveling with him dressed him in the El Al uniform, and Malkin glued a fake mustache to Eichmann's face and dyed his hair gray, camouflaging the precious cargo, making it easier to sneak him onto the flight. Aroni arrived with the car to take him to the airport and waited outside. The group was ready to leave, but there was one matter at hand. They still needed to sedate Eichmann. Even though Eichmann protested and claimed he was going to go willingly, the Mossad operatives were not willing to take any chances. So Dr. Ilian injected Eichmann with a sedative. After his sedation, Gat and Eitan grabbed Eichmann under each arm and loaded him into the car. Malkin stayed behind at the safe house. The car left the safe house and drove to the airport, and as they pulled past the checkpoint, equipped with armed guards. But the forged diplomatic plates they had in their car provided the perfect cover. The guards waved the group through, and Aroni drove the car on the tarmac and drove directly up to the hangar where the El Al flight was waiting on them. They loaded the heavily sedated Eichmann onto the plane. After he was secure with agents Yakov, Gad, and Dr. Elian, Director Harrell, agents Aroni, Tabor, and Madad all boarded, and at 12:05 a.m. on May the 21st, 1960, the jet took off. Adolf Eichmann was finally going to Israel to face justice. As most of the agents were on the plane, a few operatives remained in the country. Rafi Eitan, Peter Malkin, and Abraham Shalom and Shalom Donnie were still there. They all continued their part of the mission. They got rid of any sign that they had ever used any safe house in Argentina and burned any info or file that they didn't plan to take with them. Afterward, they all tried to leave the country, but Donnie was the only one to fly out. So Eitan, Malkin, and Shalom booked train tickets to the Chilean border, where they were able to switch routes in Santiago and get flights out of the country. On Sunday, May the 22nd, the El Al flight landed in Tel Aviv, and a black van with no windows met them as they stepped off the plane. Tabor and Gat helped Eichmann get out of the plane and into the back of the van. The door slammed shut, and the van drove Eichmann to a secret Shin Bet holding facility. Harrell informed Israeli Prime Minister Ben Gurion that Eichmann was in custody. The wheels of justice immediately began turning, and on May the 24th, Eichmann was brought before Judge Emmanuel Halevi, where he was charged with genocide and taken away to await his trial. Although Eichmann was charged quickly, it took a while for his trial to begin. It wasn't until April the 11th, 1961, that he would see the inside of a courtroom again. On that date, his lengthy trial began. For months, during countless testimonies and cross-examination, the Nazi insisted he was only following orders. However, on December the 13th, 1961, Eichmann was found guilty for the crime of genocide and his attempt to wipe out 6 million Jews.
Oh, sorry.
The court sentenced him to hang by the neck until dead. His execution date was set for May the 29th, 1962. On that day, Eichmann was led from his cell to a gallows built in the prison. He was marched up to the platform, and a noose was placed around his neck. Before he swung, he shouted, "Long live Germany! Long live Austria, long live Argentina. I had to obey the orders of my flag. The platform fell down from underneath his feet, and his neck snapped. Even when he had a chance, he felt no remorse for his crimes. He was right where he needed to be, on the end of a hangman's rope, because we all know the only good Nazi is a dead Nazi.
And straight into hell.
Yep. So that is the
Hanging was
story.
too good for him.
Yeah, it was too good for him. I mean, firing squad would have been good, and then
Drawn and
douse him in-
quartered. That
yeah,
sounds
and then
interesting.
douse him in
Hadn't seen one of
gasoline, set him
those.
on fire, So,
I haven't ever watched. What's that bowl that they put the person inside and heat it from the bottom?
a bowl?
Bowl.
Oh,
Like torture bowl or
I know
whatever
what
it
you're
was.
talking about. I
You
can't
put
think
the
of what it
victim
is.
inside and light it underneath, and it gets hot, and they just basically suffocate, and their skin melts off, and all that. Or horrific death.
It
still
kind of
think
like,
that would have been
it
too
kind of
good
looks like
for
an
him.
Iron Maiden, don't it? Like and they pour the hot molten the molten lead or whatever in the top of it until it fills up. Is that what you're talking about?
No, it's literally like a metal bowl torture device that they stick a person into, close it up, and light a fire underneath it so it heats the entire chamber.
Oh shit!
And a person essentially cooks to death.
Oh shit! I didn't.
It's a old
Death by
like it's a,
crock pot. Hell
yeah,
yeah.
death by crock pot.
But
She said we're gonna air fry his ass.
That's right.
thanks for sticking with me on that. I know that was a very long story, and I know that was a lot of names that were hard to keep up with. But
I'd have just started calling them the agents if I were you.
well, everybody had a specific job to do, so like you had to kind of, you had to let them know
And
who was doing what.
why did they feel like they needed to engage him in conversation? Just jump him, hit him in the head, drag him to the car, done and done, gone.
I mean,
Why did the struggle have to ensue?
Tie
Well,
his hand, tie a piece of cinder block to his feet, and chunk him down a well. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I get it, Shelly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think though they wanted to do, like I said, they wanted to give him a chance that he never gave his victims. They wanted to be like, hey, we're better
Gave
than
him
they
a
are.
chance to fight back when we were trying to grab your ass? No.
I don't know. I mean, that's probably why they didn't hit him in the head and kill him.
I'd be happy to explain to them how to do this. Okay.
The brazen bull. That's what it's called.
Brazen bull. That's what it is.
Yeah.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about
Yeah.
now. But yeah, like I think that the reason they were so, I guess, diplomatic about the whole damn thing is because they, I mean, the Nazis were barbaric.
They still had to wrestle him into the car.
I mean, I get it.
Yeah, I don't know.
I get it. I get what they're doing, and I get where they're coming from, and they're not the same people. They're not like, I get it. They're not like that. They're not the people who are just gonna just go out and slaughter somebody. Yet they're wanting him to have to pay for what he did, to go before a court and all this and be declared,
answer for his crimes and be judged as guilty.
So, I get it. However, that if I could have been on that team, it wouldn't have gone off that well. Nope.
No, as I said, I mean, when it comes to Nazis, there are no moral high ground. The only good Nazi is a dead Nazi. So, I mean, I'm very glad that they were able to do this. They were able to catch him. But damn, if it didn't take for fucking ever and so many starts and stops in order to be able to just follow through and grab his ass and take him back to Israel. It's like, just follow up on your information. Like I said, I know that, they didn't have necessarily the means and funds to do so, but I think they could have done a better job at going after him in the first place. So.
Well, I think that they could have, but I'll be devil's advocate here. They had so many that they were chasing down.
Yeah.
I mean, because the war ended and they fled like the cockroaches they were to light. And those rat lines that you were talking about, I mean, I'm sure at some point we'll get onto the topic of Hitler escaping.
Right. The whole Hunting Hitler series.
Yeah.
Fascinating. The way they lay it out. I used to not think he escaped. I think he got out. I think he got, swept down one of those Nazi rat lines and was flown out a day before anything ever happened, before the country fell.
I mean,
you should go and watch this. It is fascinating the way it's laid out. It's very well researched.
You know, the Soviets always claimed that they had Hitler's body. And then when they finally did a test on that corpse that they claimed they had, it came back as a woman. So,
as a woman. Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, he very well could have escaped, but at least there's one dead Nazi.
And
got him.
And I think that that's the thing, because some of the most senior of the Nazis escaped. out of Germany through those rat lines and went to Argentina. Vast majority of them went to Argentina. I believe some went to Uruguay. You know, things like that. And if you're because I know that the rumors of Hitler escaping were even back then, you know, that they were like, oh shit, no, he got away, you know, and they were probably more focused on trying to get him, which obviously they never did. But
yeah,
you know, I mean, I could see where it could take a while.
I mean,
what's the guy's name that was found in the United States?
Oh God, he was like 90-something years old.
Yeah,
I
know who up.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
And like
his name. People never knew. They were like, "Oh, he was a sweet old grandpa." Like, no, he wasn't.
Yeah, he was like
he was a mass murderer.
He was the
like he was in Minnesota somewhere, I think, wasn't he?
Something like that. And he wasn't like the executioner at one of the death camps or something along that lines?
Yeah.
Or I mean, just fucking crazy. But anyways, I don't remember the name off the top of my head.
I don't either, but I remember that. And then they were trying. There was a whole trial saying, "Well, he's too old to stand trial," and they were like, "No, he's not either."
No, he's not.
So
yeah, no, not for that.
I don't know if he ever went to trial. I think he may have at this point, but I'm not sure.
I believe he did go to trial. I believe he did. What was it? That was about like 10 years ago, 12 years ago?
Oh, something.
So, yeah, that sounds about right.
It's just a shame we couldn't catch all of them because I know Mengele got away. And you know, he ended up getting eaten by a shark, I believe, if I remember right. He had a heart attack or got eaten by a shark. I can't remember, one of the two.
Those are two vastly different endings.
Well, I know it was water related. I know, if I'm not mistaken. But, you know, I mean, he was another one that should have got, and we never caught him. But
hold on. Hit the fucking rewind button real quick. Shark or a heart attack, and they're both water related. I need you to elaborate. What do you mean?
I think he was in the water and something happened to him, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Look at someone in the comments will correct me, I'm sure, but if I'm not mistaken, that was what the deal was. But I know he got away. Like, he lived a full life after he escaped Auschwitz, But yeah, so like at least we caught Eichmann.
Whatever. Yeah.
So at least we called Eichmann, and the book that I used for this thing is called Nazi Hunters by Neil Bascom. Go check it out. There is a lot more and I like the way it's put together because it's put together like a dossier, and it's really neat and really interesting to check out. They go into there's a lot more stuff that they had to do. Believe it or not, I did trim that down quite a bit to present on the podcast, but go check out that book. This book is awesome. Go read it. But yeah, fuck the Nazis.
I have nothing to add to that. I completely agree.
Tell me everything you know, Blake.
No. Oh, you're just gonna jump straight to the end, huh?
I mean, unless you got something else.
No final thoughts or anything like that. No, I'm about tired of being, tickled to fucking death over our viewers over here with their comments. That
I'll go back and read them later, viewers. Don't you worry.
Oh, Jesus fucking Christ! You know that
I will be laughing my butt off.
I think that they do it on purpose. I think week after week they try just to see if they can get me to crack and break on camera. And hey, that's cool. Whatever. I mean, go for it. Try your best. You got me a couple of times tonight. I will say that.
I know there are a couple in particular that take great pride in seeing if they can get you to giggle.
Try to.
Yeah, as soon as you said the name Yakov, I was like, I'm done for.
Yakov Smirnoff.
I'm fucking done for.
I think they meant like Yakov. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, no, my final thought is I definitely think that he met a wonderful ending for who he was.
Yeah, and that was still too good for him.
Yeah, that's true.
What about you, Shelly? I'm sorry.
Fuck those Nazis.
Nothing. They're now in the comments like, whatever tickles your pickle. Anyway, Jesus Christ. All right, so
fuck the Nazis. There you go.
I gotta get off this fucking screen.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, y'all, don't forget that a brand new episode of After Dark with EVP drops this Thursday at 9 p.m. only on Paraflix Paranormal Plus. This week we have our special guest Nick Sarlo with Shadowhunters Paranormal Investigations and Events on with us. Shout out Sexy Legs Sarlo. This is the last episode before the season finale, which is next week. So if you haven't watched it, get signed up and get caught up as well. We have covered some fantastic places, and we have had some interviews that you've never seen those faces here on the podcast. You're only going to get them on Paraflix Paranormal Plus.
Mhm.
So tomorrow morning, we are going to be hosting up our link tree on our Facebook. So make sure you're going to the Everything Vaguely Paranormal Podcast Facebook page to find that. Our link tree is where you can get to everything that has to do with EVP. That's going to include a few things. That link to Paraflix, where you can sign up and use our code AFTERDARK25 for 25% off your annual subscription. It's going to have a link to our online merch store where you can find all kinds of merch for Everything Vaguely Paranormal, the podcast. And you're also going to see the link to our public investigations. We currently do not have any investigations on the calendar, but make sure to follow our Eventbrite page to be notified when those tickets become available. We are starting to gear up for next year. So there's also our Patreon page, which our Patreon page link, which goes to help support the show. This is just $5 a month. And you instantly unlock well over 250 Patreon exclusive bonus videos, which includes our 30-minute pre and post broadcast, behind the scene moments, special video casts, and Paracon speaking events. And we do offer that 7-day free trial for those who want to check it out before purchasing. Those links are the different ways that you can help to directly support the show and what we do. The support you give goes directly to the show and Paranormal Adventures, so we can continue to bring you the investigation episodes, evidence, and laughs. This will also go towards future projects like the EVP files and booking future public locations. So we greatly appreciate your love and support for us, as well as your support through those shares, comments, likes as well. And remember, as always, any stories, comments, or questions that you have, you can share those with us at the evppod@gmail.com. That is THEEVPPOD@gmail.com.
Like, share, and subscribe.
So for Everything Vaguely Paranormal, my partners in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith and Shelley Pruitt, we will see you next Wednesday. And thanks for Brittany for in the back pressing all the buttons.
Tuesday.
Next Tuesday. Sorry, guys. I just read the whole damn out.
I'm gonna take this whole damn thing up.
No.
3, Ryan. Season 3, Ryan.
Season 3.
Season 3. Guys, we want to thank y'all for joining us for another weekly episode of Everything Vaguely Paranormal. For myself, I am Blake Smith. My partners in the paranormal, Miss Shelley Pruitt, Mr. Ryan Roberts. We cannot forget to thank our producer in the green room, Miss Brittany, for pressing all the buttons and making us look fantastic on screen. They're getting me with the comments. And as always, we will see you next
Tuesday. Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.